Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed, where conversations are designed for nonprofit leaders by nonprofit leaders to inspire, educate, and motivate. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofits where the nerdy passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact is celebrated. Together with your host, Jarrett Ransom, the inspiring stories, tactical insights, and game-changing strategies of nonprofit leaders will be explored. Join us for real talk with real people. Jarrett and her guests unravel the mysteries of successful fundraising, uncover the secrets of effective advocacy, and nerd out over innovative approaches to solving social challenges. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense discussions with real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and discover or rediscover how to change the world together. Now let's dive in and embrace the power of our nerdy side.
Welcome back, my nerdy friends. Today's conversation is a fun one. I got to sit down and talk to my friend, Natalie Eckdahl. Natalie is a business coach, and she helps nonprofit consultants scale their businesses, and she does this in a very systematic and pragmatic way. Honestly, Natalie, I wish I had you 17 years ago when I started my business, or even 10 years ago when I was scaling it. But Natalie sits down with me and she opens up about the importance of nonprofit consultants specializing in a niche area rather than being a generalist. She also shares the common challenges that consultants face when scaling beyond a solo practice and the need for sustainable pricing and business operations. Truly, Natalie shares a lot of great insights. And if you're a consultant now or thinking of becoming a consultant, this is definitely a conversation you will want to listen to. And before we jump into this juicy convo, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to Bloomerang for sponsoring this season and making these meaningful conversations possible. Well, hey there and welcome. I'm so excited. Yes, Natalie is here. And again, I'm just really excited. Natalie and I met, I think it's been a couple of years now. We were at a conference in Florida and we've stayed in touch. One of those, like, as soon as I met you, Natalie, I was gravitated towards you. I feel like we were fast friends. We just saw each other at Icon in San Diego, and here we are. So welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jarrett. It was so fun to see you again. Yeah, it was. I was actually thinking about it. So I think in the fall, it'll be 2 years that we met. And I was your chauffeur, actually. I was your Uber driver. So I rented a car and most people were staying at the same hotel and you were speaking. And I heard you ask like, hey, could anyone give me a ride in the morning? I was like, well, I have a car and I'm by myself. I'm happy to drive you. So we had fun because it was great because we got to really get to know each other going back and forth between the conference. It was I think like a 15-minute drive or something. So we had a great time.
Yeah. That was so nice of you. And that speaks, I believe it speaks to one, you as a character, Natalie, but also our community, who we are as a sector and how we show up for one another. And that's super fun to see. So I've had the great honor to get to know you over the last couple of years. Thanks for doing the math there. But I would love, because I'm sure there's some people listening in that this might be their first time meeting you and getting to know you. So start us off, kick us off, if you will. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the role or roles, yes, plural, that you play here in the nonprofit sector.
Well, thank you for asking. That's so kind. I'm probably different from most people that you have on your podcast. I'm assuming I did not grow up in the nonprofit sector like most people here. And I actually come from the for-profit world. And I have been a coach and a person that provided professional development to small business owners and consultants for the last decade. In terms of my experience in the nonprofit world, it hasn't been as a employee or as a board member even. It has been more as a kind of key volunteer. So I've provided consulting to nonprofits as they were doing different programs or I worked with some very small nonprofits in the past that were just starting and helping them grow. And it was more bringing my skill set from the business world into those situations and from a volunteer point of view. So these were organizations I was supporting. And then as I grew my coaching practice and my training practice, I realized that I was attracting a lot of consultants whose clients were nonprofits, and it was this amazing world that I wasn't initially aware of. But going back a decade, one of my most favorite clients was a nonprofit consultant. And then along the way, I've had clients who were nonprofit consultants. And I made a decision a few years ago that I really started thinking, gosh, Natalie, you're 50-ish now. I'm 53 now. But when I made the decision, I was right about 50 and I was thinking about my next phase of work and who I wanted to pour into and where I wanted to have impact. And I realized that I was so lit up when I was working for clients, when my clients were also creating impact that I cared about. And that led me to focus on nonprofit consultants. And so I changed my practice to only be serving nonprofit consultants. And I launched a podcast for nonprofit consultants to help them grow and scale their businesses.
Fantastic. And please, before we wrap up, make sure you share the podcast so that listeners can go there too. You might be listening. If you're on YouTube, you can see us. So if you want to find us on YouTube, you can also watch our conversation and our interaction. So really good information you just shared there. And thank you so much, because that really sets the tone for the conversation. I want to talk to you about what I am seeing, also like experiencing myself, is burnout. I have been pouring into the sector for 20 plus years. I started my consulting practice 17 years ago. I often, mostly now, serve in interim executive positions. And I've got to call it out, Natalie. For me, my lived experience since March of 2020, I have run towards the fire in bigger, bolder, more intense ways than I ever had previously in my career. So I have not had the opportunity to pause and master the art of bread baking, or the art of like the cocktail making, mixologist, right? And I say all of that because I do know that so many people did that during the pandemic. And I'm calling that out because for me, I was not first line. I certainly am not a first responder, when it comes to healthcare, but the reality is I also was in many ways, right? I was an interim executive director for a nonprofit during the height of the pandemic, providing basic hygiene to the unsheltered, unhoused communities. We didn't have time to stop, right? So I do think that burnout, like, again, for me, it has just been stacking and stacking and stacking since March of 2020. But I do think that a lot of us are experiencing burnout, or just on the cusp of it, right? And so we're also like exploring consulting perhaps for the first time as an alternative. But I want to ask you what you're seeing, right? Are you seeing people moving toward this consulting space for the right reasons? And I also don't want to judge what right reason means, right? Because everyone has their own right reason. But talk to me. What are you seeing? How are you helping to navigate these conversations?
Yeah, it's really interesting because as a sector, the nonprofit sector is known to create burnout, right? Understaffing, underpaying people. And what I am making sure I'm coaching around my clients is that they're not recreating that scenario in their own businesses when they have control, because it is really easy that's your like baseline, right? So it's very easy to recreate that. And what I see with people that are choosing to go into consulting, I think it's for a myriad of reasons. Some of the top ones are to have more control and freedom in their own time and control over the work they are saying yes and no to. I also see people leaving because they are burnt out and again want to have more control and freedom. And so I think it has to do with some different scenarios. A lot of times people are not satisfied in the role they have, when they're leaving. I mean, obviously if you loved what you were doing and it was lighting you up in all the different ways and satisfying you personally and professionally in all the ways that any internal role can, if most people are leaving because that's not happening. So often where they just were, it doesn't have to be their whole work history, but where they just were was not fully satisfying them professionally. And they see that there's this other opportunity out there. And what's really fascinating to me as someone who has worked with small business owners and all different types of consultants for, a very long time, is that nonprofit consultants can build a business more rapidly than many others. And it's because people have, it's really interesting. And it's one of the reasons I enjoy working with nonprofit consultants, because people in this space have amazing experience, depth and breadth of experience. Most of the people I work with are 15, 20 years into their career. So they are subject matter experts that are coming in, and there is such a demand for that level of expertise, and organizations can't afford to one-off hire that expertise. And so that's where consulting comes in and serves a need, a real genuine need, and creates real impact as well. Now, what's the challenge, if you don't mind me saying, is that most nonprofit consultants have never worked for a for-profit organization. But when you start a consulting firm, you are a for-profit company now, right? And so that you may not know how to build a business, and even just some of the structures within a for-profit company. So the people I find that build even faster. So I think even if you've never done that, you can still anyone can start a consulting company, anyone can grow it. But those that grow the fastest have worked inside a consulting firm. So I see some people going from in-house to working at a consulting firm and thinking, this is still not what I was wanting. And I now have seen the structure I can replicate, and they go and replicate it. So I see all these different things happening in my work.
That's really interesting. And, it leads me to the next question, because you help consultants that are, really grossing, I'm thinking $1 million and above. Is that right? Like you're really helping them scale?
I help people get to $1 million. So my ideal clients are around 200K to $1 million. So I love that 200, 300, 400, 500-ish. And they're wanting to grow to $1 million business. So all of my clients are planning to hire at some point. They are wanting to grow a team and have a business that is not only on their shoulders, which is the challenge of being a solo consultant. There's positives and negatives about that, right? There's no one else to worry about. It's just you. But also, you and I are, and we've talked about this a little bit, we're both at a life stage where, our parents are aging. My dad passed away right after the pandemic, not from cancer, not anything to do with the pandemic, but I was during the pandemic a caregiver to both of my parents. And I had school-age children, a daughter in high school, and it was a wild time. And I did get burnout just from all the things I was juggling and doing. And so I really resonate with how you can be going and going and going and not realizing you're burnout until you are. And so it helps to have gone through that, because then I can recognize what's happening. And it took a lot of rest and a long time to recover from that burnout.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for clarifying. So really you're helping them grow, in that 200 to $1 million space. So what does true scalability look like, right, in that space? And also, second part, is it a viable long-term career path?
I would say yes. I believe it is. So to answer your first question, you're correct. I do not help people start a consulting firm. I have several amazing colleagues that do help people start to learn how to become a consultant. So I help people who are already successful, usually a few years into their journey. Sometimes they're 5 years in, sometimes they're 10 years in, sometimes they're 2 years in. It all depends on when they find me. But what I see happening, and the difference in being a solo consultant versus someone who is scaling a company, is you really have to change your positioning in the marketplace. So you can't be a generalist. If you think about people that even as organizations, they're wanting experts. So there are absolutely like, fractional fundraisers, fractional positions, even like generalist work that we can do as a consulting, or people that come in as like, I could do anything for you. I'm like a jack of all trades. There is a place and space for that, but it is really hard to grow a $1 million company based off of that, because it's really hard to hire other people that have all those things that you have. So it's hard to replicate yourself. So what I teach my clients to do is to create a scalable offer. And in doing that, they're specializing by the work they do and niching by who they do it for. And the who can be, there's a lot of combinations and permutations, but thinking about the size of the organization you want to target, one of my favorite sizes is mid-size organizations that are 2 million to say 12 million. I also like to encourage people to choose a sector within the nonprofit sector. Yeah. So like arts and culture, education, environmental, youth development. There's so many, right? I can list them. We could list, we go on and on listing them. There's so many different ways. And then also choosing a location. I find that my clients that focus on a metropolitan area get really well known in that space and that ecosystem, and referrals just grow. But the key is to narrow the positioning and really choose what you're doing and who you're doing it for. And then you become very referable, and also can create an offer to the market that you can replicate and train other people to do. So a great example would be like capital campaigns. A fundraiser can do, how many different things could you specialize in fundraising? I think I've created a list, and I have like 15 or 20 on my list. So there's so many different things you could specialize within fundraising. And let's just use capital campaigns, for example, because most of us are familiar with that, right? So one example I've used in one of my trainings is like, of all the things in fundraising you could do, you could specialize in capital campaigns for a certain size organization, say 2 to 10 million, 2 to 8 million, 3 to 12 million, whatever you decide is your size, and also where you're going to be, and where in we can't say any nonprofit. Let's focus in on where you're going to be, and that's how I help my clients build a consulting firm versus being a solo consultant.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And you know my story. Like, I was solo for a long time, grew my team, kind of got stabbed in the back, decided to go back to solo. And I'm just like, I'm staying solo. That is my plan.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It is great. Yeah. And you can build a wonderful living. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is just not who I am helping in my practice, but we're still friends.
We're best friends. Yeah, we're besties. Absolutely. I love it. I love this is the niche that you're supporting, because I've also shared with you, Natalie, when I hired a business coach, she was phenomenal, but she wasn't experienced in nonprofit consulting, right? So a very different market. But I want to ask you another question. Yeah, very different. Another question, because I hear it even from my colleagues here in my community, where they want to leave their position, they're considering a consultancy, but they're feeling like it's too saturated, right? And literally telling me, there are already too many consultants in our community. For that, I say nay. I'm like, no, I disagree, right? Like, we're all different. I know I'm not for everybody. We all have our like kind of niche market, as you said. But are you seeing that overall the sector is at capacity for consultants? Because maybe you disagree with what I told my friend.
I don't think it's at capacity. I do think there are certain parts of it that are maturing. For example, I would say that I see the fundraising space in general for consulting, especially general consulting within fundraising, I'm guessing it will start maturing, and there will be more competition. So when you start getting compared on price, when people are like, well, I was talking to this other person and they're charging this and you're charging that, what's the difference? When you start getting those kinds of questions, then you are not differentiated enough. You are being treated as the same. those
Yeah.
2-3 people potential consultants are all being treated the same. And so that's why I really encourage people to think about how they can narrow what they're offering. So it feels like our brain tells us stay broad, like offer all the
Yeah.
things, because that means there's more opportunity. But what actually happens in the marketplace is we all want to work with experts. We want to give experts our money. And so really understanding what people are wanting and what you can offer and the intersection of those. So another important thing to think about is what are nonprofit organizations already looking for? Someone who works at a nonprofit doesn't just all of a sudden say, I think I'll hire a consultant today. That would be fun. No, they have been given the task of getting something completed. And so it's in the budget. It's mostly likely been approved already. And there is a plan to complete something, and you come in and help with that, whatever that is. Like we could talk about different things that could be, but a lot of times people think, well, I have this idea of things I want to do, and I know there's a need for it. And there may be a need for it, but the organization has to be willing to pay for it and value it highly in order to make it worth your while to deliver.
That makes sense. And I've called myself the Jane of all trades as well. Like, what is that project you set aside, especially when I started my practice 17 years ago? Like that thing you put on the back burner, give it to me. I'll do it, like an extension of your team. But I like what you're saying is really to focus in, be that expert, like the capital campaigns, development assessments, grant writing. You're right. We can add to that list ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
But what about, Natalie, consultants that want to move beyond, being that single provider? I'm curious what the key shifts. Maybe it's mindset, pricing, as you'd mentioned before, that service model. Like, what are these key shifts that allow someone to really evolve and take it to the next level consultancy and to scale it, right? Rather than staying in that solo model.
Yes. It really is about getting the founder out of client delivery. So that is really when the shift happens. You can hire what I call micro positions, which are anything you can like delegate someone to do, like go do this research, do my admin, schedule my calendar, book me on that flight, do some marketing for me, like help me create my branding. Like those are more micro positions versus when you have someone that you can go to a client where I can sell, like for example, if it's me, I could sell an organization, a project that my company is going to deliver using my proprietary methods. And let me introduce you to my team member here who is going to be your point of contact in this project. So that is when you are making that shift. Now, how to do that? I will be honest, it is complicated. And that's why I have a job. So that's why I have a company, because this is not easy. It is not easy to do. Yeah. There are so many mindset things around this, understanding profitability, what you can afford to pay people. And one of the things that I come up with my clients is people in the nonprofit sector are inherently generous. And so my clients want to pay their team members an amazing, rate. And I come in and I say, I love that. I love that you're wanting to be so generous, but this is not going to be profitable for you. Like that now you're just like giving people work, but it's not really creating profit for you. And as a business owner, running a business is not easy. It is very challenging. And there are a lot of things that you go through that someone who's never run a business will never fully understand. And so you need to have profit happening on top of whatever your market-based wage would be in order to make it worth going through all the things you go through as a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen that. And for those of you listening, don't do what I did, but I would pay my staff first and I'd be like, okay, what's left for me? Please, can I have a little bit, and I wasn't scaling in the right way. So I appreciate you sharing that, because that is definitely something that we need to keep top of mind is like, what does this mean? Yes, we want to be generous. And we want to value our, name, our reputation, just so many things. So I love that you have a job, that you have a space in this in this sector, Natalie, which takes me to the next question is, how can people learn more about you, your company, your podcast, all the things, all the places, and then also maybe someone's looking for their best fit coach, and that might be you. So tell us more. How do we connect with you beyond this conversation?
Thank you. The shortest answer is my website, nataliemba.com. There you can find my podcast, how to work with me there, and a little bit more about me. But if you're already listening to a podcast and have your podcast app open, I would recommend that you open and look for my podcast, which is called The Biz of Nonprofit Consultants. And I think as we're recording this, I'm about to release episode 95. So there's plenty to go back to. And just to share, I'm not a brand new podcaster. I'm a grandma of podcasting. So I previously had a podcast for 10 years called the Biz Chicks podcast. And that had like over almost 700 episodes. I think I got to 640 on that podcast. So it's not my first rodeo podcasting. I love it. I can't imagine not doing podcasting. I just love sharing a lot of training. The episode I'm actually going to record after we get off and should be available when people are listening is about, are your clients too small? So I often see people having clients that are very small nonprofits that have a lot of price sensitivity and even, just instability within their own revenue inside the nonprofit, which makes it really hard to pay consultants ongoing. So I usually encourage my clients to move markets. And then let me finish answering your question. Sorry, I got off track. I got so excited. The other place I spend a lot of time is LinkedIn. So if you look for me, Natalie Eckdahl on LinkedIn, I would love to chat with you there. Send me a DM. Tell me you heard me on Jarrett's show, Nonprofit Nerd. And I would love to connect and hear more about you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. Okay. One final question. You've been phenomenal, Natalie. You've already given us so much sage advice and a lot of takeaways, practical, takeaways. If there's one final one, whether it's a final takeaway, recommendation, sage advice, whatever you want to leave our leaders that are listening to this conversation, what is it you want them to know?
Well, I think I'd love to talk to the nonprofit leaders that are listening, who maybe will never become consultants, but hire consultants. And because I hear the other side a lot, maybe I could share a little wisdom there. I would love for nonprofit leaders who have the opportunity to work with consultants to understand that those individuals are running a small business, not an organization. And so paying them timely, staying within scope, honoring their work hours is really important. And I think that a lot of times if you've never been in worked for a small organization or a small company, or even had your own company, it's hard to realize that, like if someone has a $30,000, invoice waiting to be paid, that's impacting not just them, but their team members and their whole family. So I think that, you just wouldn't know that if you've never been in that situation. And I don't think that all leaders are aware of that. And so just understanding that you are really helping not just that one consultant you're working with, but whatever team members they are, by taking good care of them as in the work relationship and in the payment relationship as well.
Sound advice. I think I'm going to take that sound bite and send it when I send my proposals. Because I've had that happen where I'm like, I know I've got all these outstanding invoices. I also have my mortgage coming up, my car payment coming up. There's money to come in.
And then my clients, when they have team members that are, may also have a six-figure salary, that a payroll that they're trying to make, it's really hard to manage all the cash flow that's happening. So just want to encourage people to think about the other side.
That's very helpful. Yes. I always think, when I come in as an interim executive, whether it's a CEO, COO, is pay our small business providers first, right? Like, how do we pay them first?
Because what it's
I know.
like.
I've been there. Natalie, fantastic. I'm also going to check out the episode that you are going to record after we hang up this recording. It sounds really interesting. Thank you for all that you do. I am so glad that you were in the sector, that you came over from the for-profit world to help us, really help us do this mission-driven work in a very strategic, scalable way. So thank you for joining me. I know we can nerd out for so much longer, but unfortunately, our time's up.
Thank you so much, Jarrett.